o'clock. Want to respect everyone's time. Councilmember Maroney said he'll be just running 6 to 10 minutes late, so he'll be joining us here shortly. So on the agenda tonight, as we discussed at your last council meeting, 2 items, both regarding streets. So the first one, we'll start off with Bushman Road update, and then from there we'll go to our streets CIP discussion, which is a continuation from a discussion we had at the March City Council meeting. So with that, I guess I'll invite Paul Sandy with WSB, who will come up and give you an update on what they've been working on with Bushman Road.
Is your hat P for Paul?
No. It's amazing how many times I get asked that question. But yes, it could be. So thank you all for having me tonight. Just here to provide an update on where we're at on Bushman Road. I think you all recall we had that workshop, I don't even know when it was, December, January? When we talked about right-of-way acquisition and went into that phase?
Last workshop, I think, on Bushman was October, but then we talked about it at the December meeting.
Yeah, maybe that's when the proposal got
December regular
executed.
meeting.
Okay. So the December workshop, we talked about right-of-way acquisition and getting into that phase. And as a part of right-of-way acquisition, doing a small portion of final design to really solidify our construction limits, to ensure that when we go out and construct Bushman Road, that we have enough right-of-way to do the improvements as proposed. So through the winter and spring months here, we got through that phase of updating our construction model in AutoCAD, and we have the construction limits finalized. The construction limits got turned over to our surveyors, and the sketch and description documents are being generated currently. As soon as those documents are generated, our right-of-way group kind of takes over and sends out what are called early notification letters with the sketch and description, and then we send surveyors out to the site to stake the boundary, so that way when residents start reaching out to our right-of-way agents, they can see what the boundary line is of that proposed right-of-way. The estimate of costs for right-of-way acquisition, we did update that based on the new construction limits. While we're not disclosing the actual amount per parcel until we get actual formal appraisals of those parcels, the total dollar amount for the fee title right-of-way portion of this did not change since the start, because that's always been considered basically 33 feet from center line in both directions. We did have a few more temporary construction easements that we are showing on here because of some sloping issues outside of that 33 feet. So that number did go up slightly, a couple thousand. So the total we're looking at, estimated cost for right-of-way acquisition for all 23 parcels is just over 100,000. I think when we had that workshop, that's what we reported last time. So that number really did not change. Of course, Ideal Township does have some parcels too. They want us to prepare the sketch and descriptions for them, but they were going to handle the few parcels that they have themselves with negotiations once the sketch and descriptions are prepared. So I also in front of you tonight, just to give you an idea of where we're at from an overall project budget standpoint, I did put this in front of you. I can kind of walk through this with you all so you can kind of understand how you get to the bottom line number, but I believe it was probably around that October timeline when we presented the preliminary cost estimate with you all, and that has a 15% construction contingency on that. So that top line, that 3.6 million, is what we're estimating the total project cost to be. You can see the next 2 lines there, Breezy Point and Ideal cost shares. That's just a portion of the total based on the project length. The phase 1 design services, which we've already done for you all, those totals are the next 2 lines down. What we're in right now is phase 2A, so that number includes 2A and 2B, which was the right-of-way acquisition portion, 2A, and then 2B is final design. So also in your packet tonight is our final design proposal. So that 450 number includes The 100,000, I just talked to you all about the Phase 2A, which was our right-of-way acquisition fee, and then Phase 2B, which is our final design fee that is in that proposal. You can see Ideal Township's portion of that cost. We put an estimate of construction administration services in there for you all to consider, so that when you move down into total project costs, those are the bottom two lines there. That's engineering, right-of-way, and estimated construction costs all in. I did a little breakdown at the bottom of the sheet there for you that shows where the engineering fees are at related to our estimated construction cost, looking at just over 24% of the total construction cost at this time. I guess from an overall update standpoint, I would suspect that we're gonna have sketch and descriptions completed within the next month. And then residents will start receiving those early notification letters at that time, which will describe the process, what their rights are, you know, the appraisal process, and whom to reach out to from our right-of-way group in the negotiation process once the appraisals are received. So that's kind of the timeline at this moment in time. I guess, like I said before, in your packet is also our final design proposal for services. As we kind of get closer to the summer months here and moving into fall, I think it's prudent to at least discuss when the city would like to construct this project. If it is 2025, the prime bidding timeline is that December, January timeline. And backing that out to get final design plans and specs prepared, I would say at a minimum, we would like 4 months, but we could, you know, on the larger side of that, we would, you know, prefer that 5 to 6 month timeline to help us manage our workload internally. And so that's why we did include that in your packet tonight, so you're aware of what that estimate is to get final plans and specs prepared and ready for bidding. David, is there anything else that you wanted me to cover here tonight?
Did you want to go over the roll plot again?
Yeah.
Pull that up.
There might be some interest in what, maybe we can start on the way east end or west end, whatever one is more preferable to you.
Start on the east end, Daniel.
So in general, the pink hatched areas are the areas in which we don't currently have 66 feet of right-of-way. So anywhere you see the pink is the areas where we would propose right-of-way acquisition. That stuff right up along the highway is, the owner says it's dedicated to the public for public use, so that first parcel, I'm pretty sure we have to do a little more research on that, but there's no technical owner of that. But that, as part of that final design process we went through, we also looked at areas for stormwater ponding, because that will be required with the project. So those are included in both our permanent and temporary easement calculations as we move forward here. So the purple lines are those temporary construction easements that we pay a small fee for to basically rent the property for a certain amount of time, slope our road appropriately, and then return it back to the property owner. Many times those easements become a negotiating point where the city can put more trees back in, or whatever maybe was taken out. That can become a good negotiating tactic for the city when that comes time in those temporary areas. But we would highly recommend the city dedicate that full 66 feet of right-of-way, which is anywhere in those pink hatched areas. If you move further to the west, Daniel, you'll see we have good right-of-way right by Green Scene. Then we start getting into some needs on the north side of the roadway for permanent and some temporary easements. I don't know how far you want me to dig into this, David. This might be, you can see mostly on the north side of the road is where we're showing through here. There are some small slivers that are needed as we move along. Some areas that don't have any right-of-way, you would just be operating under prescriptive rights right now. As you move past Ranchette, that's the areas that certainly have much more need for right-of-way, the full 66-foot width.
This is also where we get into portions that are belong to
In
Ideal
ideal, yep.
on the north side.
So this map is a good illustration, and can certainly be sent out to all the council members to review. These are the folks that are gonna be getting those letters and being contacted as part of the right-of-way process. But any time you see those little circle, those are proposed stormwater ponding areas for the final design process.
So as far as acquisition, when do you think that would be done? I mean, worst case, best case?
I'm still thinking December, January. It's really highly dependent on negotiations, but, you know, it's pretty typical that we set our construction limits, we run those right-of-way acquisition and negotiations right along with final design and have a final bid package ready to go in that December, January timeline, if that's what's the council's desire is.
So if there would be LRIP grants again next year, we would more than likely miss that window.
You could still certainly apply for it, and I think you'd be in a much better position. I think the area that we likely missed out on is, I think MnDOT sees that right-of-way acquisition piece as a risk to a project. They look at that pretty closely when they're scoring LRIP because certainly right-of-way negotiations could put a project behind.
But it won't hurt us, in your opinion, that Pequot Lakes isn't participating, so it's in essence the road to nowhere with the new road. Is that gonna hurt us in a grant process?
I don't think so, no. I mean, it's still a connection road that sees a high volume of traffic, even though other jurisdictions haven't improved their portions.
Who was the deciding factor for the grant that we?
So MnDOT does internal scoring process, and usually the district state aid engineer who works in Baxter at District 3, they will compile all their projects and kind of rank them up front, and then they send them down to central office, state aid, to do more in-depth scoring and review of those projects. And the listing was
Yeah, they don't provide us with like the actual, like the
Ranking.
score sheet.
right.
You know, what I provided to the council when that came out was what they published, where pretty much I think their reasoning for denying was other projects scored higher.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty generic, but they don't give us you scored X points, and so
Yeah.
you missed it by, we don't know how much we missed it by, just that.
Do you know if they like do an equity score like within the county, or like who are we going up against? Like other county projects?
So there was 3 buckets that LRIP was broken up to. One bucket was set aside, I think it was $7 or $11 million set aside for townships
Okay.
specifically. There was another bucket of,
And that didn't go, Ideal didn't have a separate application for
no,
their
we
portion of
lumped it
it?
in, yep.
Okay,
The routes of regional significance is the one we applied for, given Bushman's regional significance to this area. And then the county has a rural county road safety account. And so that 100 million gets split up into those 3 buckets. And there was, I don't even know how many applications there were, but
I just pulled it up, there were,
they
They-
do look at regional equity as part of that.
There was 378 applications.
yep, and they funded 86 projects, but that's out of all buckets, so they went 29 county projects, 22 state aid cities, and then we fall in the non-state aid cities / townships and tribes. Those are 35, so actually the highest percentage of funding actually went to the non-state aid cities. So 35.6% of the total $102 million pool went to non-state aid cities, and then followed by counties. The least amount of money went to state aid cities.
Isn't it also true, though, unless the project is shovel-ready, your chances of getting a grant are reduced? I mean,
I would say that right-of-way component did hurt us. But I will say that, you know, when I was in Brainerd, we had a project that got funded through LRIP. It was more safety. It was a roundabout at the Civic Center. That got funded prior to right-of-way acquisition too. So, you know, but that was much less parcels. I think it was 2 or 3 that we had to get right-of-way from.
Well,
And
that's
there
higher
were
traffic.
willing participants, and there was a very high crash rate.
Yeah.
So that all comes into
I
play
will,
too.
I will just add, you look at the list, I think there wasn't a single project in Crow Wing County that was funded
Oh, really? Okay.
For small cities, or was it?
for anything. So there wasn't a single small city. Crow Wing County's application got denied. Yeah, and there's no, and then on the state aid, I don't think Brainerd got anything either. So I don't see.
I don't think they submitted
I don't
anything.
think they submitted anything, yeah, so there was, Brainerd and Baxter were the only 2 state aid cities, and I don't know if Baxter, I have to look at the submission, they aren't on the approval, so yeah, there was no LRIP funds that were in Crow Wing County.
I think there's only 3 applications, I think, total.
I think Baxter was one of them, so I think it was us,
Yep.
City of Baxter, and Crow Wing County submitted, and they didn't fund either.
Well, and I think too, I mean, we didn't get started with this just on the basis of getting that grant alone as
Yeah.
part of the process. I mean, maybe there's another opportunity before
Yeah, I mean,
Shovel
certainly,
to-
if we get through right-of-way acquisition and they pass another bonding bill where they release more funds and open up another solicitation of LRIP,
Okay.
it makes complete sense because we have the application done, and the
Okay.
applications don't change much, but we can actually check more boxes and say that we're ready to construct, you know, final design is done, right-of-way is done.
2025 is an appropriation year. So, now granted, the way those generally go is the legislature during the 2025 session will appropriate money that generally then gets spent in
Right.
2026. But,
Right,
so,
okay.
Questions, comments, anything I can help to answer?
But I think the thing we have, unless you have any other questions or comments from Paul, the one thing we are looking for kind of coming out of tonight is kind of that next step is, obviously, this is workshops, we're not making any decisions, but when would you like, at what point do you want to consider final design? So that's kind of that Paul's question of, they need at least 4 months, prefer that 5 to 6 number. And so, based off of that, you know, if we want to, if the goal is to construct in 2025, you know, June, July is kind of our cutoff date for being able to give WSB a go-ahead on final design. So I think that's kind of the thoughts. So do you want to wait until we get further more into the right-of-way acquisition piece? I know the talk was, in the past, has been, well, we're going to do right-of-way acquisition no matter what. But do you want to go, you know, get a little further more and get those letters out before you make that decision? Or kind of when you want to start talking about that part?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get everybody's opinion on where they're at with moving forward.
I don't know how you can move forward with final design in that time frame, not having the right-of-way acquired. I mean, part of what we don't know in that process is, are we going to get involved at all in any eminent domain situations? And I'm sure you guys running into that off and on, I mean, that in of itself is going to require additional time. It just feels to me like a decision to move forward with construction in '25 would be extremely quick in terms of just everything else that has to fall into place.
I agree with Brad on that. I think we need to have final acquisition done. There's no issues, because if we don't have final acquisition done, we're never gonna get a grant anyhow. I mean, I don't believe personally we will, unless a project is shovel-ready with as competitive as those LRIP grants were. I would like to see land acquisition done.
I had a question on the fact of if we have to go down the eminent domain, and which delays the process, what would that change in the design? Like if we can't get, like, is there a chance we cannot get the land acquisition and the design needs to be redone?
I would say that the construction limits are solely based on design speed, and a design that, tries to or limit the amount of right-of-way to the maximum extent practical. And so, you should obtain your 66 feet. It's pretty much a prescriptive right already. And those temporary construction easements are usually kind of a no-brainer, for landowners to, it's a small amount of money they receive, and then you get your land back either way. So it's really the 66-foot portion is, and this is probably more of a city attorney question, but, you know, that's already your prescriptive right. And certainly this is the right way to do it, is own it or have it under easement. So that prescription question never comes into play. But I think, you know, from a delaying design standpoint, we would be proposing 66 feet, whether it was, you know, whether I guess is what I'm trying to say, 66 feet would be the minimum we would want either way. And so this design is designed in such a way that we stay within that 66 feet to the maximum extent practical. And anywhere we go outside of that, we wouldn't go after permanent easement. It would be a temporary construction easement.
I would just say, again, without Attorney Langel being here, but with that process, the eminent domain or condemnation process, the other term, at this point, we have to prove essentially that it's needed and it's to do the road, and we're trying to make the road safer and things like that. And I would agree with Paul. I think we would likely prevail and be able to prove that. And again, one of the biggest things being the fact that the prescriptive, we can argue prescriptive rights already. So we're just trying to formally acquire what we already have. We're not trying to say, well, prescriptive is this, but we want to acquire this. We're saying, well, we already are maintaining prescriptively 66 feet, so we just want to formally acquire that 66 feet.
And from an eminent domain process, if that did come down to that, we're already a long ways down the route at the point where we would go to that. The appraisals are already done. Really, eminent domain just allows for the party that we're trying to acquire land from to get an appraisal, and then a judge decides. And I think the eminent domain process that I went through in Brainerd was less than 60 days because all of that was already done. We already had our appraisal. They get to get a comparison appraisal. The judge looks at both of them and says, okay, here's the solution.
So I'll go back to the question then. So if we start securing the easements and everything goes well, and we are going to design to according to the 66-foot right away that we prescriptive should have, if we don't do design now, we would definitely not qualify, well, most likely not qualify for LRIP next year.
I would say if you did design now, it would put you in a better position.
So if we design now, puts us in a better position. We've kind of talked, and again, we're not formalizing a decision, but we kind of talked about getting those prescriptive rights, or sorry, easements. And if the design doesn't change, my question is, why the wait? And I understand that it would delay the process, but if everything does fall into place and we can get everything in line, it puts us in a better spot to apply for 2025. So I want to understand better of why we would hold off if the design will be the design. It sounds like the design won't change based on not getting a land acquisition because we have prescriptive rights. Am I understanding that right?
I would say that we would go after a minimum of 66 feet, whether or not we were redesigning this road, either way.
Okay.
You may have said this, but how far down, like in July, say, for example, because you said June or July, like how far down the process will you be in, like sending letters and
We
negotiations?
would be probably quite a
and-
ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if we waited till July to like, say, make a final decision on moving forward, I mean, we'd at least have a good idea of like how things are going.
Yep.
Which I think is kind of what we talked about initially, like let's at least
Yep.
see what residents are saying before we.
I just do want to just add one point of clarification. LRIP isn't something the state does every single year. So I just want to put out there might not be a solicitation next year. Because again, it's kind of as the legislature chooses to fund it.
It was a bonding year, which those monies
So
usually
right
come from bonding
now,
bills.
to our knowledge, there is no solicitation for 2025.
And I don't think we should be relying on that as a reason to move forward. Bushman has been ignored for far too long. We just had someone recently ask where to send the bill for their bent rim because of Bushman's condition. Many people have been waiting for this to be done, so I feel like delaying it isn't in the best interest of the community. And I definitely don't think that we should be relying on the grant. I think we just need to move forward with getting it done because it needed to be done a long time ago. So that would be my opinion on it. We need to just keep moving on it. We're already, we're on a roll on it and it's going to move forward. I think it needs to move forward in some capacity no matter what, because something has to be done. So I don't think we should delay at all. I think we should continue moving forward.
I guess I disagree. We can afford to delay till July, and still, I don't think anybody says there nothing needs to be done. I mean, I fully support the project. I mean, walking my dog tonight before the meeting, one of our officers stopped. We talked and I asked him about Bushman. He said, make it wider, make it safer. I've had numerous conversations with Chief Sandell. It needs to get done, but I would like to see how the acquisition is going. As Rebecca stated, we have until July, then it needs to be voted on.
And from a WSB internal, a lot of our staff goes out in the field in the summer. And so our heavy design season, when staff comes back into the office, is usually that September, October timeframe. And that's why I said the 4 months, If you back it off December, we would like to have, if we're gonna move forward to 25 and you guys wanna take advantage of a good bidding environment to get out in December and January, we would like to at least, at a minimum, I would say August, September, when our design staff really comes back in the office and we can hit it full bore and get it done quickly.
From an acquisition standpoint, and this is actually like a genuine question, like how it's going change how we view the project? Right? Like what does that mean exactly?
Means exactly that. Get an update in July. What is the rush when we have until July? Why does it have to be done now? I don't understand that.
Well, isn't it already going to be done no matter, is it just getting a head start?
Final design. We have until July. We'll have an update on land acquisition.
Yep.
And I don't understand the rush.
So it's just basically you want the update
Correct.
on land acquisition.
Because
So-
we have the time.
But if there's eminent domain involved, would you then say that you would want to hold off on the design?
I will cross
because-
that bridge when we get there. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't become an
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, that's my thing is like, okay, well, what are we looking at, right? So if we're saying wait till July, are we saying that because if there is eminent domain involved, now all of a sudden we're going to start to back off the project? Or are we, that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, what is that going to do with how we decide we would want to move forward? Because if we know it's a need and we know that we need to fix it and we know that this is what the cost is going to be, no matter what, we may have eminent domain may be inevitable no matter what. So that's kind of where, if we know that the project is needed.
I think it's just nice to give residents the time before we make a decision.
Exactly. We need to hear from residents.
Yeah.
Give them
So-
time to process it and stuff before we just say we're moving forward. I just think it makes sense.
So in May, we would discuss approving getting easements, and then we'd have a report back in July.
No,
Is
so.
that- so yeah, so what is the process
There's
then?
no, on the easements thing, we're already
working
doing
on
that. So at this point, I guess what I'm hearing is WSP will keep going through the process, and then we'll either at a council meeting or a workshop or something in July, we'll come back.
Give you an update on what we're hearing and things like that, because really it takes a ways to get through that right-of-way acquisition process before we actually have like settlements where we would be coming to you, a couple meetings to basically with, 10 in hand to say that, okay, here's where the appraisal came in at, here's where this resident, here's where we negotiated to, that middle ground or
So
whatever.
that's what you would come back to us with, and
Yep,
then we would
is-
say, would that change the design based on like what the agreements are, or is that gonna stay exact, I mean,
Like
does
I
that
said,
change that?
we would highly recommend going after 66 feet for any road municipal project at a minimum. And so that would not, we designed this road to try to stay within the 66 feet under all circumstances. And there's some areas that we have to get outside that where we would acquire temporary construction easements.
And
So
yours-
that would not change the design.
Okay, and I'm just trying to
So as
understand
part
like
of
what
the-
that means
so as part of that
exactly.
negotiation, it's, here's, WSB's team's getting appraisals. I think it's two appraisals, right? Mm-hmm. So
Well, it's appraisal check. So you have,
they're gonna appraisal, and then another appraisal will check that appraisal, so it's kind of
Okay,
double. And
but
then,
the design's not really changing.
the design does not,
so
well,
in that-
Okay,
as Paul
okay.
shared in that negotiations, in that thing, their right-of-way team, this is what they do each and every day, is negotiating things like, okay, talking with residents, okay, what is your concern? Is it, well, again, as they get
Is
these
it
exhibits,
tree
are they
related?
trees?
Is it
Okay,
property
can we-
related? Is
What if
it-
we replant some trees? It's that kind of thing. And
Oh,
then
I see,
once
okay.
they feel like
Okay,
they've
I
come to a
understand that, okay.
compromise with the resident, they'll come back, they'll probably package a couple, we'll have a meeting, and we'll say, okay, each resident, this is kind of what we've come to an agreement on. Do you accept that agreement?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it's not just the road. I mean, there's a lot of different things in the design. That could be trees, it could be.
They're all
like,
negotiating
okay,
points,
I
right?
see what you're saying. So
Yep.
that for me, then that's totally fine. I thought you meant because
Mm-hmm.
the design wasn't changing per se, but yeah, so
Yep.
that makes sense. I'm fine with
and we
that.
would typically come with, a package of whatever, however many we have like agreed upon numbers for. We would ask the council, go into closed session, we would talk about each parcel. If we agree that all of them are good, we would go back into open session and say, we approve this, cut the check, and it's done deal.
Okay, okay.
I just feel too, it is important that we let the taxpayers.
No, I agree. I agree. I was under the impression more so like the road, like just the road itself, not necessarily like the entire package of it, so.
Yeah, we tried to fit the road design in that 66 feet because that is a very standard minimum amount of right-of-way that you should have for a road. And then in areas where we couldn't make it work because of big inslopes or ponding or whatever that may be, we had to get a little bit of outside that with temporary easements.
And I know we talked around June, July, that's a July timeframe, but you threw out August, September.
So that's that 4-month thing, right?
Okay.
So where, if at the latest, I would say that you would want to be out to bids by the end of January.
Okay?
Not be out to bids during the holiday season, of course, we try to avoid that. So if you solicited bids January 1 and opened them January 31st, for example, you would still probably take advantage of competitive bid prices.
okay.
But once you get a little bit further on into the spring where contractor schedules start filling up, then I still think you'll probably get competitive bid prices, in the spring, but given the contractors you have in the area, but.
And we'd be looking at the potential of July or August being formally moving forward.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that would give us enough
July,
time,
August.
just from a workload perspective with a lot of our staff being in the field anyways.
Okay?
It would give us some work to do in the office during the summer, but certainly we can bring all of our staff back in that September, whatever timeline and just go to town
Okay.
on it.
That's good with me.
So John, just a clarification, what I'm hearing is obviously WSB will continue on. If there's anything that needs council attention in the next few months, obviously we'll bring it to your attention. Otherwise, we'll bring an update back in July on where we're at, and then if you're ready to move into final design.
And just as a little more, as part of the final design scope, we do have 2 open houses in final design too. So once we get to like a 60% level, a 90% level, where we really can start seeing where are we gonna plant trees, where have we negotiated planting trees, where our impact's gonna be the greatest, and driveway access, that's when that stuff really starts. When people actually start thinking about the road getting constructed, how am I gonna get out? That's when we can really start having in-depth conversations about, we'll provide access to you, but here's gonna be your route for a certain amount of time, or whatever that may be. So there is 2 open houses with that.
As far as the planting of trees, it's up to the property owner to water and care for the
There's
trees?
usually a maintenance period.
Okay.
That we include in contracts. And
good.
that's, we can formulate that however, the city wants to see that. Our typical is 2 years, where if a tree dies, in 2 years, they issue a maintenance bond, at the end of a project for a 2-year period, and, would be required to come back and replant those if they do die.
Okay, but they're still on the hook for the watering.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you
Yeah.
would hope that you get enough rain, but obviously like last summer.
Yeah.
You know, we're dealing with that in some of our park projects and things where the contractor's gotta come back, and it's just a risk that they take on as a
We've had
landscaping contractor.
Projects, I know Paul and I worked on before, was it H Street?
Yeah,
That it was, they planted the grass and it came out as all weeds.
yeah,
And so they had to go back there and redo it, so.
yep.
Those open houses you mentioned, is that going to be just like through general public notice? Or are we looking at residents along?
It would be
the-
like the similar to what we did for the first one, where, social media, we can certainly send letters to the residents along the corridor to make sure that they are aware of it. A lot of them will already be aware because they'll be getting letters from right-of-way, acquisition. But certainly we can advertise as
For
however.
the
we-
for the last workshop, we did, obviously our normal, our social media and all that. And then we, I think we worked with WSB, we created a list of. Postcards, and I think we sent it to, was it 140 properties?
Yeah, we did like a
So
radius around the
everyone
project.
on Bushman and then everyone within a certain radius. I think it was about 140 postcards we sent out on top of our regular
General,
social media and stuff. And again, now that we have the Breezy Brief, the Bulletin, and the e-newsletter, we can be including it in those places as well now too.
And I believe you included all properties north of Bushman that use Bushman as the only
Yeah, but that was
access.
kind of we did all
threshold.
properties north of Bushman.
That need
and then-
Bushman Road
and then
for
need
access.
Bushman Road, and then we did something like, we went like I don't know, 1,000 feet or something.
where it would
south
make
of
the
Bushman.
most sense that people would travel north to get
Yeah.
to Bushman, yep.
It was about 140 parcels that got direct mailers.
Have you already made contact with everybody that needs to be included into the right-of-way acquisitions?
That first contact will be at that early notification letter.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
They're, as Paul said, they're just finishing up the exhibits.
Okay.
So as he and I, when we talked about it, essentially what it comes down to is they like to have the exhibits when they give the early notification, because then it's not.
Because then the stakes go in the ground almost like right away, like you'll see stakes, the letter will say, surveyors will be out putting stakes in so you can see where this is. So we want to have that exhibit, the letter, and then like a couple of days later, once we know everyone's gotten it, our surveyor goes out and stakes it so they can see where it's at.
Okay.
Do you have an idea of timing on that, did you say?
I think you said like in the next,
I would say within the next month, month and a half, we'll have the exhibits complete and then the letters will go out.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
They're prepped and ready to go. We're just waiting on
That
yeah,
makes
because
sense.
actually the exhibit, the letter language actually has already been approved by the city attorney, so.
Okay.
yep. And the easement language
And
and
the easement
everything,
language, yeah. The city attorney's actually already approved all that language, we're just waiting on the exhibits themselves.
Perfect. I don't have any other questions.
No, it's helpful, thank you.
I have good direction. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paul, I apologize to you and my fellow council members and staff for being late on, so
All right.
That's okay.
I'll recap it on the video.
You didn't miss anything.
Okay. Okay, moving on to our second item of discussion tonight, street CIP. So again, this was something that we brought before the council. Well, we talked about it as part of the budget process for 2024, and then we brought a draft of the RFP, request for proposals for the CIP, at the March meeting. At that time, during some discussion, you had some concerns. I want to talk about right-of-way standards and just more questions about the RFP itself. So you tabled it for further discussion at a workshop. And then at your April 1st meeting, we scheduled it for today. So as I put in the memo, based off some of the conversation that we had in March, I did go back and redraft the CIP RFP document. And as I mentioned in my memo, I took it largely from the city of Crookston, issued a CIP, an RFP for essentially the exact same thing last fall. And theirs was really nicely detailed. And so I really pulled heavily from theirs just to give it more detail of what exactly, things we're looking for from a streets. Here's what we expect you to do, streetlights, sidewalks, all the things that were mentioned in the original RFP. Signs, one of the things, and I talked to Public Works Supervisor Zierden about this too, is inclusion, is if we're talking about streets, when you do roads, that's always a good time to address the infrastructure. Generally, that's either right next to or underneath that road. So one of the things that we kind of listed right there as a separate, I guess you could call it add alternate, would be for sewer mains and storm sewer, where they would map it and also provide ideas there. Again, that's not the plant itself. We'll have an upcoming conversation about the plant. This is actually the system, the pipes in the road. Because again, if you're gonna do the road, we might as well talk about the pipes in the road. So that was something that was not in the original RFP. Also, something different from this RFP is, you'll see this based off of some of the examples I provided of other cities, is instead of doing kind of looking like a 20-year plan, it's down to more like a 5 and a 10-year, because those are easier chunks to plan. 20-year, you can look at all the streets, and it still is part of this, we'd still want a inventory of all of our streets. This still asks for an inventory, but then it goes, okay, in the next 5 years, what are the top 5 priorities? And then the 5 after that. You'll see some of the examples I provided, the city of Brainerd, they have a 10-year. They went from like they already kind of did a 5-year, moved to a 10-year, with the focus still kind of on those first 5 years, so that's in the packet. City of Nisswas, I also provided some information of what Nisswas does. Nisswas a little less formal. You can see City Administrator Jenny Max, what she provided and her explanation of it. They kind of do all their streets on a 30-year cycle, but then they kind of do them again in every 5 to 7 years they do a chunk. So they did a chunk in 2019. They're planning on doing a chunk in 2025, 2026. They'll do about, I think she said they're going to do about 9 miles of paving. She doesn't get into depth of how much of that is just, mill and overlays versus reconstructions. Again, that's part of what in the CIP during the assessment of the actual roads, that would be part of what would be expected is obviously they're doing a inventory of the roads and the condition. And actually getting into the depth of looking at doing things like soil borings, figuring out what is the subsurface of each road, and that way helping to figure out, is this road just a mill and overlay, or because of these factors, maybe this road needs more than that, helping to determine what that budget should be. So that's what that CIP document that I put together asks for. Again, Crookston, this is part of Crookston's, I think, was pretty successful. They got, I think, 6 proposals, and I listed the one that they ended up going with. From everything I've heard, they're pretty happy with what they got. So at this time, Nick with Woodseth is here. He can talk to you more. I know we want to talk about some standards in the packet. Joe provided some standard documents. As you can see, we've had over the years 3 different standards. So we had one for 2003, and the council revised it in 2006, and then it was revised again in 2013. And I think, as Joe described in March, it doesn't necessarily, we've revised it over the years and then haven't necessarily been strictly following it based off of different projects. But you wanted to see kind of what our standards are, so you could see those. Joe also provided, put in the memo, the memo he provided you back in March, again, just providing some high-level estimates based off of miles of road and what previous projects cost, so just to give an idea of kind of, where we might land. And then I think, Nick, you also provided some other standards from, I think, Lake Shore and some other cities to have a discussion about. So with that, I guess, any questions you have right off the bat? If you want to talk about street standards, I will just add with this RFP, where we are at this point with it. If you actually look at the RFP document itself, on page, let me scroll to it, page 15 of the packet, we have the current draft schedule. So if the RFP, if I were to give direction either tonight or formally at the May 6th council meeting to actually field it, we'd field it. Proposals would be due beginning of June. Then we would review them. If it was determined we wanted to interview consultants, we could do that in June. And then a decision would be made in July, and then we'd give that notice to proceed. Again, how long the process takes, that's kind of up to the engineers. I guess we got two of them in the room. They can kind of tell you how long they think that this process would take. I'd say probably a number of months to get done. So that's kind of where we're at right now. If you issue the RFP as it is, there is the other option of you could also just ask your city engineer to give you a proposal to do it. So you can either get the RFP, get proposals from multiple engineers, or you could ask your city engineer, which would be Widseth, to just give you a proposal to consider. So those are two different approaches you can take to this. But ultimately, we just want to hear from you and see what other questions we can answer regarding the CIP or just road standards or this process in general.
I'd like to hear from our Public Works Supervisor, just get his take on our current state of the roads and get his opinion as well.
Sure. So basically what I provided for information, I mean, that's telling you the percentage of our roads, age, pretty much they go hand in hand with condition. I mean, I have the age of every road, width, length. The big concern I have for our city is the roads paved in the early 2000s. That's 50% of our roads. It's a big chunk. If we let them age out at the same time, we're gonna have entire neighborhoods, like for example, your entire neighborhood, Mayor, it's all the same. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could potentially be one giant project, rip your neighborhood up all summer. I would think it'd be good to try and knock the top off. So start early on some of the roads. Some of the roads can be pushed out, better condition. As far as to try and give you a flatter, more consistent road age, I think it'd make budgeting better, more consistent, so you won't have spikes. A lot of it depends on how you want to do projects, and that comes down to dollars. You know, group them up, do a bunch. My experience, if they're spread out, that works well instead of just trying to do a large amount. Paying for it, you know, that's a whole different discussion. I'm looking at our roads, and another very important factor is like, decide what you want our roads to look like before, in my opinion, before the plan is put out there, because these example plans, I mean, there's, you know, to camera our entire sewer system, that's $200,000. That's going to get you looking at things that, in my opinion, you know, they're midlife. Our sewers aren't 50 years old. I mean, we have 100% PVC entire city. We jet every 3 years. When I jet the lines, that tells me the condition, if I'm pulling dirt or not. I don't pull dirt. If we see problems, we investigate those problems. I mean, there's a few manholes that, you know, have incipient concrete erosion, minor things, and we try to stay on top of them. Same with lift stations. I mean, we've rebuilt them, pretty much every single one. Pumps, panels, we just did 2 remodels, or we're starting to. We have 6 and 7 today and tomorrow. Our sewer, like the way I feel, our biggest concern is repaving our existing roads. The sewer, it's taken care of better than I mean, every 3 years is, I don't know anyone else that does that. We can worry about that down the road, because if you throw sewer like North Lakeview, I mean, the sewer line in some places is, I can't imagine what it was like putting it in. It's 27, 28 feet deep. Like ripping it up in a 60-foot right-of-way, I mean, it'd have been interesting to be here in the late 70s, let's just put it like that. And then as far as,
About the non-paved roads, because I've had multiple residents discussing some of the issues that they're having, a lot of the dust coming in their homes, erosion. So what about those as far as like priority?
right now, I mean, you know, the current policies we operate under, I mean, they were designed with a plan. When you have road maintenance, you know, to replace a paved road, it requires a petition. That's requiring very concerned people to let the city know, we want this done badly and we're willing to pay for it. Same with gravel roads. A petition to upgrade the road tells us the people there really want it, and when it comes time to pay for it, they're willing. That wasn't an accident. I mean, that happened on purpose. The city has relaxed requirements because we had 100% assessment on paved roads to do maintenance. That's been relaxed to 50% right now. Gravel roads, you know, if a council wanted to soften the requirements, you know, instead of 75% of petition, you could bring it down to 50% and make it more manageable. As far as how it's paid for, that's your discussion. Our history has been, that I'm aware of, it's 100% assessment to get you to a paved road. I mean, a paved road is a luxury. You know, people have often told me, well, you know, we spend more on gravel and grading and chloriding. It'd be cheaper to put a dirt road in. Then why do dirt roads exist?
What is your opinion on, I know that from what I've heard, the, 0% that Nisswa has for everyone pays for everyone's roads. Would you have any, think of anything that would not allow us to move in that direction or that would cause any problems? Like, do you think that would be something that is feasible for the city of Breezy?
I mean, anything's feasible. The funding is the issue. I will say, in my experience, removing assessments, so let's say, you know, there's no assessment, your demands for the road, well, I'm not paying for it, you may want a 24-foot or 26-foot wide road, which doesn't seem like a big thing, but when it's a 20-foot road, 3 feet, that adds up. That's 30% extra cost. Not to mention, a 26-foot wide road isn't opened in one pass plowing. So if all of a sudden all our roads go to 26 feet, our plowing time, we have to hit the routes twice to do what we could do in one. I mean, be cautious, because when you get to people thinking something's free, street lights, I mean, I was just doing, our street lights, I think we probably have half a dozen, $2,000 a piece. $10 to $20 a month, you do 100 of them, you're looking at, 30, 40,000 in operation, which our city's maintenance budget, I mean, it's not extravagant. We do the best we can. Like our entire gravel budget, we can put a 1/4 inch of gravel on all our dirt roads that we maintain. So we spot gravel, we build up places that are weak. Our entire asphalt paving budget, that covers, if it's strictly crack sealing, once every 10 years. That's not, a lot of places are 1 every 3, 5, somewhere. I mean, we've made an effort, and it's come a long way. I mean, our budget was, when I started here, I had to plot buying tires between years, because replacing great loader tires wipe the budget out. We can maintain our things. We've made progress, great progress. But yeah, the assessment would be, it would make doing projects, no assessment, it'd make, I think, the residents less opposed to projects, absolutely. but, you know, there's a catch to it. in my
Have you talked to
opinion.
Jenny about it? Because I know that they do 0%, but then if the neighborhood wants streetlights or that neighborhood wants a sidewalk, then what they do is they separate that out. So then that
Correct.
neighborhood
So,
pays
yeah, so
that
this-
assessment for that amenity on that
Yeah, so
road.
anything other than what their basic standard is, again, yeah, if they want a nicer street light or something like that, that does get assessed. They do assess 100% for the first time it is upgraded. So if it does go from gravel to paved, they do 100% assess that. I think that's also Brainerd's standard as well. First time it's upgraded, 100%.
It's 100%, okay.
But then after that, yes, then they maintain it. The city, you know, they have a levy for streets. And then, as she put in her description that was in the packet, they kind of do things in about every 6 or 7 years. They'll do a bunch. So, and then they don't do anything, and then 6 or 7 years, they do another bunch.
I think the 0%, excuse me, is misleading in the fact that they levy, you know, for everything. To me, it's 3 separate conversations. The document that Joe put together is for the paved roads. Then you have the gravel roads, and then you have the discussion on assessments. Irregardless, you know, they cost millions, and whether people pay through the levy or an assessment, the bottom line is it's taxpayer dollars.
It's definitely a longer conversation, like, it's not something you
Oh,
just like,
yeah.
it's definitely separate conversations.
Well, and what you get into if you're bonding and if it's less, if the bonds are less than 20%, then state statute 429 comes into play. Then it goes to a vote,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, so
So,
that's-
I mean, there's a lot of, this is gonna take a while.
And that's if you're using 429 bonds, which are the most common bond for streets. You know, Paul and I were talking before the meeting about like NISWA, what do they do? And clearly there are other kind of type revenue bonds you can do. But then what they're doing is they're bonding against their street fund that they levy for. So that's kind of, and then a lot of times those bonds have different restrictions on like how much you can bond at any different time. You know, there's general obligation bonds you can do. A lot of times you do those for a bigger number, but those have to have a referendum. So that's where that 429 is generally what most cities use for their infrastructure, and that's what Councilmember Jensen was saying, is if you, per statute, assess less than 20% of the project cost, then it has to go with a referendum vote before you can issue those bonds. If you assess at least 20%, there's still a lot of statutory requirements like public hearings, notification of property owners, all of that. There's a whole process to that, but you don't have a bond referendum. It is council's decision.
I like the process though, because there's a lot of people that, you know, it's been brought up a lot, that they want certain things, right? They want the road paved, or they want sidewalks.
Streetlights,
Yeah, they want-
sidewalks.
So it would be nice to go through the whole process to say, hey, if you want these things, here are the options, and here's what that's gonna cost, and then go down the road of
Yep.
do they still want what they, you know.
Yep. So going back, I will just say kind of to that discussion at hand is, as Joe said, you know, obviously that's a discussion we need to have, but part of that is we also need to know first what are we doing with the streets, and that kind of goes back to the question of the CIP of, you know, Joe's put together some great numbers, some estimates, but we don't have like, you know, part of this, the idea of doing the CIP is not only assessing the condition, but also need. You know, part of this idea was having, if an engineer does this, is a road on a need perspective might rank high, but in the recommended order of doing them is not as high because it's a dead-end road with 4 houses on it versus another road is a thoroughfare with 50 on it. That one with 50, it's in better condition, but might rank higher because it's has a lot more need or a lot more traffic on it and things like that versus the road that has 4 houses on it. That's a dead end. So that's kind of, again, what the CIP's goal is. Let's get this, you know, we know what streets we do have. So we know what we have. but also conditions, list of order they should be done in, cost estimates to do it. And then, yeah, then the next part is actually, is that we need to have, how are we paying for this? Do we want to implement it? How fast do we implement it? How are we paying for it? Is it assessments? Is it levy dollars? Combination thereof? Because even if you do a 50-50 assessment, that's still 50% levy. These are all discussions that have to happen before we implement, but we still kind of need to know, well, what are we dealing with?
One concern I have with the roads that we have that are sometimes large paths, I mean, flexibility is needed in our CIP plan. You know, the roads inside the main gate, the bird lanes, Circle Drive that the homes overlook the resort. I mean, that's a wide golf cart path and it's a road that the city's responsible for. So engineers are gonna engineer to this standard, but don't we also need flexibility with roads we have that, I mean, you can't make them any wider. Drainage is a challenge. There's a lot of places there isn't utility easements, there's not drainage easements. I mean, how do you build that into the plan? I mean, there has to be
And
flexibility.
that's one thing Joe and I discussed is maybe part of that direction. I think we give to the, whichever engineer is doing this, is design to what is there today. So, yeah, put Breezy Point Drive. That is, what's that, Joe, like a 40-foot right-of-way? Was there 20 feet of pavement, if that?
Breezy Point Drive, no. It's, well, there's two portions of Breezy Point Drive, the north and the south. The south is very wide, has a paved sidewalk. The north's pretty narrow, leading into the resort. It's 21 foot, but it does have I believe it has a 60-foot right-of-way.
So that's an option, is you could just say design, or when you're doing your, not really design, because in this situation, we're not designing. That'd be kind of, once we get into doing a road. But do your assessment, your analysis based off of the pavements that's there. We're not going, if there's 40 feet of right-of-way, don't expand it to 66. Whatever the right-of-way that's there, that's what we want, do that. So that's another option. It's just what pavement's there. You know, and also this too is, I think neither Joe or I would be recommending, things of like, let's put curb and gutter in when unless it's absolutely needed for stormwater or things like that. We're not gonna just, let's put a curb and gutter on every street, because now you're doubling costs. Just, we don't wanna do it just for the heck of it. So it would be pretty much designed to what's there. If there are areas that for whatever reason they believe it needs to get beefed up, make that recommendation. But that's definitely an option, and not just say everything must be 66 feet.
That makes sense to me, especially the roads that we have.
I would also add minimum maintenance roads. That's a separate classification than dirt roads. Because their degrees of construction are vary quite widely. Some are very close that it wouldn't be a major project, and some are extremely challenging. And that's, that would be, those are our three main roads: paved, gravel, minimum maintenance, platted but unbuilt. Because those generate a lot of questions as well. And right now we treat them just like a dirt road.
So what are typically the questions that you're getting on the minimum maintenance in general?
How do I get a building permit? Make it a maintained road. How do I do that? 75% petition presented to the council. As far as I know, I'm the last one that was successful. I did it in 2006 or 7. I remember I was sitting out there and Tim called my road a goat trail. And we came back to the next meeting and he said, well, actually it's not that bad. We can do it. Because I wanted my driveway on First Street Circle, not First Street. But I have not received, an actual petition, because depending on the road, I mean, when you're talking 100 lots, that's a very significant ask of an owner to do that. And we were fortunate as 100 feet. We had to get a hold of 14 people, or my wife did it, so I don't know the specifics. But it was something we could handle.
And I will say to that, Councilman Scott, I think we also still have enough lots available on our, other paved roads or our gravel roads, I'll just call them our developed roads.
Yep.
That the demand on the minimum maintenance just hasn't been there, because if someone's looking to build, there's plenty of lots still available that they're going and building on those lots instead. Now I think we've long said that as those lots continue to get taken up, yeah, more demand for those minimum maintenance will come. I agree with Joe's assessment of kind of, if, from our priority, I think the paved ones are the first concern, just because they've been paved and are aging. Then there's that question of the gravels. Do we just keep maintaining them, build them up as a gravel, turn them to paved? And then kind of that minimum maintenance is that third question down the road of, okay, what do you want to do with the minimum maintenance? Do you, thing with the minimum maintenance, it's long-term been like that chicken or egg thing. Do we wait until the demand is there that we finally get a petition to put it in? Or is it we put in the road and then hopefully development happens? There's risks either way. You could be waiting for a long time for someone to get a 75% petition, especially when most of the people that own those lots do not live in Breezy Point. And so how do you get all those people together? The risk of putting in the road, you put in the road and development doesn't occur. You put in a road and we have a housing crisis. You put in,
Well, tax forfeit lots. I
Yeah.
mean, you put in a road, assess it, and like typically a minimum maintenance lot, you're paying $50 to $100 property tax. Put a $10,000 assessment, that changes that, and
Isn't,
like David said, you could end up, who knows, half of them go in tax forfeit. Well, the city's got to pay the bill.
with some of those lots, though, probably not all, with P and Z redoing the ordinances and zoning,
it'll be part of the discussion.
it'll be part of the
When we
discussion
talk
that
about
they
that
will
of-
need to address,
Yeah,
doing
the
that.
road, the road obviously impacts what you can do with zoning wise, but as part of the zoning code discussion, yes, we'll figure, okay, these minimum maintenance areas, how are we zoning them? It's not uncommon that for those kind of areas, you zone it something really high level. So the idea is as it gets developed, it can be zoned to whatever the development is calling for. Because maybe those areas call for, I highly doubt it, just because of the topography. Highly doubt it because of the topography, but maybe at that time it's calling for high density. Well, then we'll zone it to high density. Kind of those areas generally from a zoning perspective, you zone them broad, like rural, and then as it gets developed, it gets zoned to what the actual development's going to be, the actual development pattern.
So question, because I did have a resident ask about it. So they live on Winter Trail. And so what you're saying is that, like, let's just say every homeowner or landowner on Winter Trail, you would have to get 75%. I just want to give them if they wanted their road paved, is that the path then? If let's just say they wanted Winter Trail paved, right? So they would need to get
Winter Trail is paved.
or
It's shady.
Shady Trail. So if they wanted Shady Trail paved, then they would have to get,
That would be, that's our minimum requirement. But ultimately, if 20 people came in with a petition and asked you guys to pave the road and you said yes, I don't hold the control to that. It's the council. If, that's a nice number to have because that indicates there's buy-in. We want this, we're not gonna fight it, but.
The benefit of that number is it's kind of one of those things of, if 20, as Joe said, if 20 people come in and that's 40%, right? You can say, yeah, we'll take it up. But if they don't meet that threshold, it gives you the ability to be like, nope.
Nope.
I just want to give them something to like walk away from, like as far as like what, because they ask like when or how, and I want to be able to say, this is typically what happens so that if.
I mean, I have the generic form whenever people ask for it. Usually the discussions don't get that far. They get, okay, and.
Okay.
I know I petitioned my road. When did Snowman?
Before my time.
No, Snowman was 14.
Oh, for paving.
Paving, yeah. So I petitioned, because we were on a gravel road, so I went to the 8 property owners. One never got back to me, but 6 signed on.
Okay.
So we brought that forward, and actually it was like, I think it was $8,000 per property assessment. It was quite high as an expensive project, but at that point, we did a 429 project. And we also looked at Shady, but we had a number of people that came in that did not want to, so the council pulled Shady off.
Okay.
Right?
When was
I'm
that?
recalling that, right?
Yeah, correct.
When was that? I'm just curious, getting some timelines.
14, 15?
Very early on, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was one of our first paving projects, and it's probably the biggest cul-de-sac in town.
Yeah.
That's why the assessments were so high.
Was it 8 years, 8,000 over how long did you have to pay that 8,000?
15 years. I'm still paying for
Again,
it.
part of
Okay.
that varies with every project. It's kind of what does the council want, you know, and maybe even negotiating with that group. Is it a 10-year? Is it a 15-year? You know, it's kind of the same thing we've done with sewer projects. It's, you know, each project kind of sometimes gets looked at differently of how long do you want to be able to repay this? What are the triggers to repaying it? Again, with most assessments, there's triggers such as you get 15 years or the property selling. You know, if the property sells, you know, again, we've got a lien on your property. We're going to get everything that's back out of whatever you made.
And sellers usually pay for that, typically if the buyers ask anyway.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's,
something
yeah.
the buyers and the sellers negotiate, but that's generally a trigger, is that if the property changes hands, the assessment is due in full.
Was that
So that's general,
75%?
But that's getting in the weeds of how the assessments would be structured. You know, again, when it comes to paving versus non-paving, a lot of times what I've seen it is you have the people that want it paved because they don't like a dirty car. It's easier for plowing in the winter. You know, you have the issues that we had at this last big snowstorm where the roads weren't frozen, so the gravel roads got they had to go back out and regrade them because they got beat up because they weren't frozen. But then you also have the people that don't want them paved because they look at it as an actual something, you know, a development deterrent where I like my quiet neighborhood, and if it gets paved, you know, the fact is more people prefer to live on a paved road than a gravel road, and they look at it as, well, if it gets paved, then the lot across the street is going to get built on. If it's gravel, maybe that won't get built on as long as I live here. So that is what some people kind of take into account of why they may or may not want their road paved.
Okay.
So going back to the CIP and discussion around minimum maintenance roads, that's in no way a part of,
Right now, minimum
proposal, is it?
maintenance, I don't believe is included in this. I think we were including our built roads.
and so with the add-ons then, like with the storm sewer and the sewer, I mean, you had mentioned quite a bit about the overall condition of the sewer and how it's maintained, and, you know, your feeling is that it's in pretty good shape. What are your thoughts with, I guess, what the city stands to gain, and ultimately, if the price comes back reasonable of having the sewer and the condition of the sewer, from understanding, what would be asked for a part of the road CIP?
As far as having the sewers inspected,
Yeah,
I guess the thing you most likely would gain is you would discover if groundwater is coming through seams on the sewer pipe. Because rainwater, that's part of the reason lift stations are checked every single day. You get a 3-inch rain event, if you're getting, you know, broken pipe, storm gutters, whatever, each one of our lift stations serves a certain area. I know every single house that's connected to that area, if we see a spike, a 2-inch rainfall and our hours triple, something's wrong. We don't see that. The jetting we do, you know, that tells me if, say, a pipe is out of the water table, gets punctured, sand, and when we see it, we camera the line. We don't get anywhere near excessive amounts, but I would say cameraing the line, I would suspect North Lakeview, Shoreview, sewer lines that are in the water table, because that's kind of a tricky one that we can't, I mean, theoretically, if we went out at midnight when no one should be using water and we looked at the lift station and there's a good steady stream of water coming in, that'd probably indicate groundwater is entering that sewer pipe. But I don't believe sewer pipes stay sealed. I mean, after installation, very long in my opinion. I mean, 100%. There's an allowable amount, and I mean, when we look at our run times, there's not a significant swing. I mean, we've had 6 inches of rain in this city, and the run times didn't change significantly anywhere. I mean, it's a newish system. I mean, like Brainerd, for example, they're 50% clay. I mean, that's
A lot different deal, yeah.
it's a different discussion if you're dealing with clay pipe or Orangeburg or things like that. I mean, that's a benefit of a new system. I mean, in a lot of ways, the lifespan of PVC is not necessarily known. You know, clay pipe, 50 to 100 years. 50 to 100 years seems reasonable for PVC as well, as long as you don't use a rotter on it and, use water cleaning. And, the people don't damage it. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like, again, if as proposals come in and that as an add-on, if the council's feeling like, yeah, it would be worthwhile to spend the money just to have things looked at, verified as to their condition, especially in relationship to what the timing of a road improvement could look like. Yeah, I mean, that answers my question. Thanks.
Yep.
As part of the CIP, how are they going to address utilities? I mean, are they going to look, if we're going to repave a road, and if you've got cable under there, power, are they going to look to try and move it out from under the road?
So,
Or, to
Jen-
pave roads
I'm
and,
actually going to toss that to Nick. I'm going to let you talk about what you guys normally do, because you kind of, go ahead.
Well, typically, when we're redoing roads, it's not, the city's, it's done by the private utilities. So we would, notify them, have utility meets, and there's just a lot of correspondence that goes on between the private utilities and the engineer and the contractor. And if they need to be moved, we get them moved. Some cities don't allow private utilities underneath their paved roads. So if they go to reconstruct or improve roads, if there is utilities underneath the roads, they will require utility companies to move them. Some don't. Some communities don't require that. So yeah, it's kind of up to the
Nick, and I think the reason a lot of cities don't let private utilities under the road purely is because if they have to be maintained, the road's got to be
Correct.
ripped up.
correct?
How does it change with like connector roads, like with Dove and Ranchette? Does that change with like how the assessments work or like?
Yep. The collector roads, which are Dove Street, Ranchette, Ski Chalet, Bushman, and Thrain, I want to say. Right now, our policy is that's paid by the city 100%.
Because Dove's pretty bad.
Yeah. it
Do you
would
know
be-
that?
It would be probably, it's one of the handful of projects. I mean, if we start doing roads tomorrow, I could give you 10 roads. Go pick 2 or 3 or, however you want to decide. There's a good list, but like David mentioned, establishing priority, that's always a challenge.
Okay.
If
Well,
one
yeah.
person lives on the road, it's very important to them.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, no matter what order you put them in, you'll always get that person of, but my road.
Yep.
Yeah.
So currently, what funds do we have set aside for, the improvement to the streets? Is there, in your memo, we've been putting aside X number of dollars for several years. So I know in talking to Joe, there is roads they've identified, or are streets that should be done. There's several right away. Is there funds for that?
So all the money that we've been putting away has essentially been going into the capital fund. So we don't
That's what I
have a
thought.
separate construction fund. That would be something I think as we go down this process would be wise. You know, we're currently working on the CIP, and it's the same kind of thing of starting to make our finances a lot more robust and separating that stuff out. So instead of it's like, well, it's in the capital fund. Well, the capital fund is all these things right now, and separating and be like, this is roads, this is, you know, the capital of equipment and things like that, and this is operating, starting to split that stuff out. So if we did this, you know, Brainerd, I know Brainerd has a construction fund, and other communities do the same thing, would be recommending of being like, this is streets.
Yeah,
The streets fund.
that'd be smart.
And so to answer your question, essentially it's whatever, right now it's whatever's in the capital fund.
That's what I thought. Yeah, we need to make changes on that. I mean, there needs to be dedicated funds for each different type.
And then again, that's where, again, having that, the CIP helps start that process of we know, okay, over the course of it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, we need this much money in that fund. We can seed it using this much cash on hand, whether it comes to the current capital fund, investments we've talked about, things like that. And then, so then it's seeded with that amount of money, and then, you know, over the course of the CIP, we need this much extra, and then we can levy a specific amount every single year to keep it kind of flat, to fund it, versus this year it's 400,000, next year it's 100,000, this next year 600,000.
Like the sewer fund, basically. We need to set it up like the sewer.
And the fire district.
Yeah.
The CIP for the
Makes
fire
it easier
district.
to budget, for sure. Okay.
So as the RFP is now, then it would also include looking at, given an established road standard for improvement, the existing gravel roads in the city as well?
At this point, I believe it would look at,
Just asking, because that's how, I guess, as I read it, I was understanding it, is that it was including not only the current
Yes.
paved roads, but also the current gravel.
it is, it includes the current roads and the gravel roads, but not the minimum maintenance roads.
Okay.
So I guess a question I would have is,
Does it-
we're saying that an existing gravel road has usually been paid 100% by the adjoining property owners. And recognizing the age of our existing paved roads and the several miles of them that we have, would it make sense in any way to focus this RFP just on the paved roads? I have a feeling that doing that, we're probably going to be well beyond likely 10 years, you would think, getting to all of them.
At least.
And just kind of hearing what you guys are saying, I mean, a 5 to 10 years from a planning standpoint is kind of ideally where you want to be. Otherwise, too many things change
Yep.
beyond that. I don't know what others' thoughts are on that. It's just a question I have, you know, are we,
I'm just wondering
looking
if
at
there
and
are some
considering
like
too much.
gravel roads that might have priority over a paved road potentially. I don't know. I have no
Can I ask, is
idea.
this something that maybe, is it maybe split out separately where it's like, we're gonna focus on this, but we want a recommendation on gravel, or we could just leave gravel out entirely?
Can we consult with the people who live on gravel road? I mean, can we do something? Because I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that would like their road paved, so I don't want to like leave them out completely out of the discussion. I would like to be able to at least like, you know, give them the information, because some people don't know how to get their road paved. They're kind of just like, when is my road going to be paved? So maybe getting some information out to them on like what that looks like.
I think it's worthwhile keep it in there too, because if you start looking and there's a lot of paved roads that abut gravel roads, that if this road becomes top priority, what does it look like? Is it cost beneficial to upgrade that one road at that same time?
Like Shady and the.
Like Shady and
yeah.
Snowman that was
Yeah, yeah.
attempting to do to try to combine streets to get a better bid package. And so if there is an idea or goal that we want to at least consider it, at least having it in the CIP would be allowing us to think about that. And if there's 3 roads that are going to be redeveloped in an area, you know, that we plan on year 3, and there's one gravel road there, should we consider that potential of, well, we need the bid for the 3 roads, but also we know that this road is gravel and there's a need for it or desire for it. Give us what the additional cost would be. Do you need the CIP to include it? I don't know, but at least it's something that we'll have to consider when roads are coming due is, do we want to pave at that point a gravel road?
This is maybe just a question, but like for gravel roads, would they also just look at, like, what does it cost to just maintain it in its current state? I'm just
I've
curious,
done that.
because like,
Yes,
that might be helpful too, because if you just build in, like, we're not gonna do anything with these gravel roads, we're just gonna try to maintain them, but we need to know like what it's gonna cost every year to do that.
Yeah, how
Yes.
long?
That's something I think Joe already kind of,
You kind of already
I've
have.
done that at several road committee meetings where,
Okay.
I took the cost of the grader, I took the average hours a year, prorated it over the lifespan, figured out fuel consumption, all those things, pay, how much money we spend on gravel per year and spread it out by the foot on every road, dust control. Every time I've done it that way, I mean, it's gravel roads are affordable. That's,
I think the issue a lot of times with the gravel roads is they're so dependent on climate. Where again, if you have a wet year, they might have to go out there and reshape them now and then. Again, if we have a situation like we had where a late snowfall or an early snowfall, that affects how the plowing happens. So there's a lot of things that can affect the maintenance of the gravel roads differently.
and to be completely honest, our gravel roads are constructed in a manner that makes maintenance the most challenging. Like if you've been in farm country, section roads, they're built up, water does not sit on them, clearly defined, like where you're grading, you're not sloughing grass off, it's easy to pull the roads in. A lot of our gravel roads are at grade, some of them have sunk below grade because dust, you lose like half an inch a year up in the air. And frankly, I mean, elevation, like dirt roads and steep inclines do not work well together. When it rained, I mean, it used to be when it rained 2 inches in an hour or two, we were moving dirt with skid steer for 2 days. We've got to the point where it's not that bad, where we're taking it from the bottom of the hill, bringing it up, filling in washes because ditches are not established. I mean, or they're very, very mild, and it just, everything maintaining our roads, gravel roads especially, is more challenging than it could be. But realistically, when you have hills, are you going to bulldoze the whole thing to, that wasn't the mindset when they were blazed. Basically, it was get a road, and we're still dealing with things, and we try to make improvements each year.
So to Councilman Maroney's point about when we have the CIP and we know that there's a road that's going to be improved and it does abut a gravel road, I think it would be good to at least have that in the plan so that while we're doing this, we could give notice almost to the gravel road residents if they want to pave that in conjunction with the upgrade, then they can pay for it. Like, I mean, at least giving them some kind of like,
Like a road commission perhaps, where like there's public participation. Because I mean, in the past, we did public works committees, like of council people, like planning and zoning. I mean, how they have people that transcend councils, so like the traction we get on, because I mean, that's kind of where we're at with our roads. They're aging. We have to come up with a plan that gains momentum and keeps going.
So,
My coworker, he's on a road commission for Lakeshore, and he tells me how wonderful it is. And hearing, your feedback, I think that would be,
a good
because
idea.
planning and zoning, they seem to handle things, and most of those guys are, I think they're 2-3 councils in, some of them. I think that'd be a discussion point at a different date.
It's a good idea.
I would agree. I think we should have that discussion.
Is part of the gravel road maintenance that you guys do, putting calcium chloride down at all?
Not anymore. We just switched to mag chloride last year.
Okay.
But whatever's cheaper,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And that's been like, you know, how do I determine to expand it?
Right.
It's tricky. Everyone wants it. You know, some of our roads are total sand. It doesn't work on that.
Right.
So we've expanded our coverage by narrowing it and increasing the budget, because we did have a lot of requests a few years ago and action was taken.
Maybe we could get like an add-on cost for the gravel roads, like we are doing for sewer, or,
As in split it out, kind of what.
because then we could
Councilman-
maybe assess it easier if we want to actually proceed with the gravel portion of it right now? I
Go
don't know.
ahead, if you want to ask a question, yeah. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you bet. I'm Dave Reese. I'm with Woodseth. Nick and I are coworkers. I've been the city engineer for Lake Shore for 27 years. Been the city engineer for Cross Lake, working with Nisswa, working on capital improvement plans, been developing policy for these cities over that long time period. And it's really policies that you're kind of talking about when you talk about, you know, your different road classifications. You've got minimum maintenance. That's a classification of roads that really has a unique policy associated with it and the type of level of service that they get. Gravel roads that we've been talking about here, the discussion's been around. So, and then the paved roads. You know, you've got an inventory that you started with. You got to know what you have, what the condition of each road is. So that's a good start. This example that we handed out is Lake Shore's capital improvement plan. It's a living and breathing document that was based off their inventory many, many years ago. And we look at the roads every year, especially paved roads, because over the course of a winter cycle, you can see certain roads might have more dramatic changes in their condition than others. That affects priority sometimes. When you're planning out over a 5 or 10-year period, most of the time the goal is to try to make it financially, not the peaks of cost, but more of a steady cost so that you can plan your road levy. So a lot of communities that we work with are levying upwards of $300,000 a year, sometimes 4 or 5, depending on the intensity of need out there and the time period that you're looking at resolving your road projects. So you're always going to have a particular road that's kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And, you know, Bushman Road's kind of that example, you know. So you have to swallow that somehow and work it into your financial planning going forward for your whole road program. But just some of the things that are included in here, and I know it's kind of small type, but we can get you a larger one. It includes planning out what roads really should be overlaid, what should be full depth reclamation where you grind them all up and they're beyond an overlay point. Some roads need to be reconstructed, and when you get to that point, you really start looking at what the road standards are that you're going to build that to. I think we all have to face it that, you know, the road service level changes on some roads. As development occurs, there's more traffic, you've got connector roads. You can work the gravel into the overall 5 to 10-year plan looking forward and give those folks the opportunity to petition the city. And that's generally the way gravel roads are brought up to a paved condition, is through petition. I know you mentioned 75% of the lots being kind of the policy
Yep.
for Breezy
70 property owners. So,
of property.
yeah, so
Okay.
75% of the lots. And
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention so that you're aware that the 429 assessment statute, the minimum is 35% by frontage for petitioning. So 75% is above and beyond that, just so you're aware. Okay? And going through the 429 process is something that, you know, as consulting engineers, we do all the time. Sometimes it's worked into the overall bonded projects that there's no assessments on, but you have a mix of assessed projects within that. That's doable as well. Okay, so just wanted to kind of give you a little background on what we handed out here tonight. And there's, I think, something to be said about, you know, just kind of right-sizing your capital improvement plan for your community. So we tried to pick examples of like communities, so you can kind of get a flavor of what Lakeshore, Nisswa, other area kind of lake communities do. You're talking about how many standards should you have when you have, you know, a road that's very narrow and building kind of to that standard. In Cross Lake, I can tell you, we had like 7 different road standards, and it was all going to that point, you know, to try to best fit that community with the standards. So happy to answer any questions you might have, but I just wanted to give you some background, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate
Helpful,
that.
and a good point on Bushman, because we'll have to start thinking about how to pay for it when it's already,
Yeah.
after it's done.
Well, and this would be nice to have for Breezy, something that laid out what each road would, you know, what category would fall under and.
So I guess at this point, I think the one main question, I guess I've got 2 kind of questions hanging out there. One is the gravel road question is, do you want to just keep it as it is? Do you want to break gravel roads out separately? And then the second question will be, okay, if there's no other concerns or with the RFP, do you want to, again, kind of do a full RFP process? Or the other alternative is essentially give this RFP to Widseth and have them give you a quote. So it's kind of the the options there. You can go full on and let any engineer that wants to, and then you can pick which proposal you like best, or just have the engineer that you've contracted with also just do that too, because we do have a contract with Widseth. You could just choose to use them too. So again, the reason we did Bushman Road as an RFP is because the council at that point decided they wanted to do the full RFP. You guys get to decide. So I guess the first question is finalizing the RFP we have here of what is it you want to have done. So with the gravel, leave it in there as it is or split the gravel out, I guess is kind of the 2 things I'm hearing and would like consensus on.
I'm fine either way. I mean, splitting it off, you'd know how much that you're gonna bite off into that and a little bit more work for them to account for, but I'd like to see it at least quoted. So if it's a separate adult item, I'm perfectly fine with that.
I would agree.
'Cause I think it would help, I mean, we should have like a CIP for at least even maintaining them. I mean, I think
Yeah, I agree.
like a formal one would be good. I mean, I know we already have one, but
So I'm hearing gravel roads as an
add
add-on.
on.
Okay?
Yeah, I think that's what I would favor as well. I mean, clearly, we need to know what we're looking at for ultimate investment in those improvements, probably more so over quite a period of time from now. I mean, we're probably not gonna have to worry about that for, you know, in some cases, probably 40 years, 30 years. And to the, I guess, question of approach, yeah, my feeling is anytime that we're committing taxpayer dollars, which is gonna be, I would think, a pretty sizable investment here in a plan, I would favor doing a public solicitation and allowing whomever is in that area of work to make a proposal on it.
Okay, I guess, oh,
So as far as the document we received here from Widseth, I mean, each engineering firm that's bidding it, I'm assuming they provide this, but just in their own format.
yeah,
They,
this is essentially what the end result we're shooting for is something like this. Each road and kind of when you would recommend it being, like what's its current condition, kind of what Dave presented of, you know, does it need a, you know, mill and overlay? Does it need a reconstruction? Does it need, you know, when would you have it? What's its current condition? Is it, you know, we need to be doing it in the next 5 years, next 10 years, next 15 years? Kind of what, a little bit what Joe already has, but just put it down. I think that's the ultimate goal would be to end up with that. So then, again, that next phase, we can, the council can then take this and go, okay, this is what we know. How do we want to fund it? When do we want to implement? How do we want to implement? Because that goes into, that's the next question of, is this a implement next year? Is this, you know what, we want to build up a fund, we're going to implement it in 5 years? Again, those are the kind of, that's the next question once we have the final study and
but
recommendation.
again, we won't have these numbers before we have to make our final budget decisions this year, or will we? I mean,
Well, I've got
it's hard to make
engineering firms
decisions
in the room.
when you,
What, without tying you to anything, this is a what month project?
I think it's probably a 2 to 3 month project at the minimum because it takes some time to discuss this, and if you don't have a specific road committee, you know, that can kind of grind through those issues and some of the policy questions, it's going to be a little harder. So if we're meeting directly with council, there's going to have to be some discussion over 2 to 3 meetings at least.
So, again, going back to now, taking that, okay, say 2 to 3 months, based off of the schedule I have in here, you're looking at, you know, if the council selects and we say go to a consultant in July, you're looking October, November. So before the 2025 budget is approved, but likely after the preliminary is done.
I mean, if
but
we,
there's
if,
money that can be, you know, allocated
Oh, you
as
could-
we
you could
work
say-
through
you
the
could say
budget
we're working-
process.
You could say we're
Yeah.
working through it, whichever engineer you're working with, you could say, where are you at this time? You know, what would, and then the council can say, again, with the preliminary, you always go down, you can say, throw $150,000 in there, and then if we want to do less, more, you can pick a number. We'll discuss that during the budget process.
yeah, because we could talk about building that up, because if we're hearing like it's usually 300,000, we're probably not going to do that in year one, but we can sort of build our way to 300,000 potentially.
Yeah, so that would be that whole next discussion. We can have that again as we go forward through the budget process. At that point, we'd have an engineer on board to kind of be included in that discussion as well.
Because just the different talking points, I mean, this is going to consume the council for the remainder of the year. I mean, in my opinion, getting a streets plan, getting money set aside, having a plan needs to be
in the
a high
next-
priority.
In the next 2 months, while we're going through the RFP process, if the council wants to, again, have that discussion, it sounds like there's some intrigue on the idea of maybe a streets committee or something like that. We can have that discussion in preparation for this process starting of, hey, we want to do streets committee, whether that's, again, just go back to kind of what we had before, where it's 2 council members, or it's a collection of residents.
Is it possible, do you think Bill would speak before the council? I'd like to know, what Lake Shore's commission consists of.
I could ask,
I mean, is it primarily just residents?
yep, I've discussed with Bill enough. I think it's a 5-member group, couple alternates. My belief would be this city, that would be one of the easiest things to fill, because I get the question, I don't know, several hundred times in a couple years of all these things you've just asked me, and that would be a great response. If we have an opening, get on the commission. It also allow these plans to, someone's they want their road paved. That's a pathway to do it.
Right.
Instead of come to the council meetings and,
Go to the commission
Yeah,
first.
I like that
Yeah.
idea.
But I think it gives the taxpayers of the community a better understanding.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
is, we can do whatever you want, but somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
that's the hard part.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think roads typically, they're some of the first things to get cut. And, they're important. We need to maintain our infrastructure.
So I think
So-
we're all in agreement that.
We can put something together and we'll bring it before
Okay.
you. I guess the last question I have then, so I think understanding, okay, we'll field a full RFP. Do you want to see this change with the gravel roads and have it presented on May 6th and then we field, or are you comfortable with us making the changes and then just fielding the RFP?
I would just as soon have it come to the May council meeting. I think that was the expectation with these workshops that we established early on, is that we weren't going to really formally move anything forward. I don't know, I may have the wrong recollection
That's fine.
of that, but
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, I
make
think
sure.
it's just a week, so why not
Yep,
wait
yeah,
till
we'll
May?
bring it on, so we'll revise as we've heard with the gravel road change, and then we'll bring it formally on May 6th for you to authorize us fielding that, and then we'll go through that process.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council today?
I think this is helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
super helpful.
Okay, then I think that is all we have for you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's just a reference to Crookston here still.
Oh, okay, yep.
And then the